autoimmune diseases.
Autoimmune is tough.
Yeah. Is there anything we can do to
It's a good,
ameliorate it? Yeah.
so it's a good question because it's a very complicated issue, right?
Mm.
And autoimmune, so the question is what is it to start with, right? It's the recognition by your immune system of things that shouldn't be there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And frequently what happens is you get molecular changes in your own system that your body recognizes as foreign, and then it attacks it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if you have, for example, glycation can actually change the way a molecule is shaped, right? Because molecules work three-dimensionally. Sometimes glycation or methylation or acetylation can change a molecule. And the body goes, well, that's not mine. And you create an autoimmune disease from it. And women tend to obviously get this more than men. And the question is how do you protect it? Well, you can either lower your immune system, which then is that a setup for getting other diseases,
Mm.
or you can protect the molecules that you have, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the big things in autoimmune disease, and it could be in any molecule, but one of the big ones is actually pieces of your DNA that get exposed that shouldn't be exposed, right? And over the course of time, because of methylation changes in your DNA, as you get older, obviously you're more of a setup for autoimmune diseases, which is why spermidine is one of my favorite things to take. Because if you look at the spermidine molecule, it's a long, linear, positively charged chain, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at DNA, it's a very long, negatively charged chain and has a major and a minor groove, and they're negatively charged. And what spermidine does, it actually gets in there and it lies in the grooves. And it actually, I like to think of it as bubble wrapping your DNA. And it doesn't change the three-dimensional structure of it. It just protects it, right? And there's some evidence that by protecting your DNA, you're actually lowering the incidence of autoimmune disease. You know, is it going to do it 100%? Probably not. But part of the game of longevity is lowering relative risk, right?
Mm-hmm.
Lowering the risk of disease. I can't say you're not going to get something, but you can lower relative risk. So by protection of the molecule, spermidine is going to, by definition, lower the risk of some autoimmune diseases, right?
Right.
Getting rid of glycation is going to get rid of the risk of some relative risk of autoimmune diseases. So the more you can protect your molecules, the lower the risk will be. Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay. COVID.
Oh, that's a tough one.
So I mean, so COVID itself is COVID, right? But kind of long COVID. You've had COVID, and it seems to take a long time to recover, and especially there's heart issues. So have you any ideas on, yeah, how you could kind of recover quicker?
That is a tough question. I mean,
Mm.
I have speculated and I will continue to speculate. I'm not a researcher per
Mm.
se. What I can gather, and someone may call me out on this, but what I gather is that mostly it has to do with inflammatory issues. Because when you look at long COVID, if you measure things, it's mostly inflammatory issues. So I would say you need to lower the inflammatory constituency in your body, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your interleukins are up, all of your cytokinins are sort of in a fit. And I think that's one of the basic problems. And I know it's causing some heart disease. A good friend of mine with zero cardiac disease had a heart attack because he was post-COVID and he had some inflammatory issues and he had a clot that went to his coronary. So I am convinced that what you need to do is load up with anti-inflammatories. One of my absolute favorite over-the-counter anti-inflammatories is curcumin.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you have to make sure you get one that's bioavailable, and there's the whole escalating cascade of like what's more bioavailable, and they're all fighting about it. But as long as you get a reasonably bioavailable version, I'm actually convinced that that's going to be incredibly helpful. And there's a variety of anti-inflammatory molecules out there that I think are going to be extremely beneficial. But I think that's the best answer we have at the moment if you're just looking at oral agents. If you want to be sort of more interesting, and I actually think that the answer would be exosomes. Exosomes are amazingly anti-inflammatory. I know the FDA says we shouldn't inject them systemically, but we all do. And I think that would significantly reduce long COVID. I personally inject them once a month, and I feel like $1 million when I do it.
eye aging. So we did talk about eyes last time, and
Mhm.
you said you like them. You find them fascinating. I remember that.
Oh, they're amazing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. They're
They're
kind of
amazing. So, just I guess any thoughts, any more thoughts on how we could do that? Now, I did try and find that Efficell
Mhm.
carnosine, and I actually found it very difficult to get them to ship it to me.
Oh, sorry.
But it's still available, right? You're still,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
You know,
okay.
it's funny. They make the best eye drops and they have the worst customer care ever. I
Mm.
ordered some, I'd been using them for a very long time and I ordered some more and they never showed up. And then I called the company and they didn't answer their phone. So I don't know really what their deal is, which is incredibly unfortunate because they're the only carnosine eye drop that does not burn. So I'm not really sure what to do about it because they are the best carnosine eye drop. Um, but I'm not sure if we talked about it the last time or not. Visomitten is also just an amazingly useful eye drop. It's an SKQ1 mitochondrial enhancer. Comes from Russia, which is a little bit harder to get now. The good news is I met someone and they sent me like hundreds of bottles, so I'm sitting on a wealth of eye drops, which is fantastic. Um, but so the SKQ1 sort of is more in line with helping your retina, the rods and the
Mhm.
cones, and the carnosine is better at the lens, as far as I
Mhm.
can tell. So between the two of them, I gotta say my vision is unbelievable.
Excellent.
I'm 54. I don't need readers. I am absolutely the same as I've always been, which
Wow.
drives people nuts around here, but it's kind of nuts.
That's really excellent. Yeah.
Sorry for you. I can see.
So any supplements for eyes?
So actually, it's really interesting. The xanthins tend to be very, very good for eyes. So astaxanthin is good. Zeaxanthin. There's a variety of xanthins. If you look up the eye health, generally speaking, there's a mixture of 2 to 3 xanthins, and they're extremely good. They go to the rods and cones, and they're very useful. So I have not done absolute research in all of the xanthins, but they tend to be useful.
Okay, so again, changing a little bit tack.
Mhm.
So do you think about your supplements on a daily basis? And what I'm kind of asking here, so if you're going to go rock climbing, do you say, okay, well, I'm going to have these supplements today, and today I'm working or I'm doing something with my brain, so I have like cognitive supplements. Do you kind of think about it on a daily basis?
No, I absolutely do. I absolutely do. Because my week stash is different than my weekend stash. So during the week, I'm a physician. I run a very busy operating room. I am nonstop, very intellectual, whatever. So I have an absolute important pile that I take in the morning every day. And then on weekends, you're absolutely right. It's different. For example, when I know that I'm climbing or going to the gym or swimming, I will time my metformin and my mTOR deactivation such that it does not affect my muscles, right? So I don't tend to take the metformin during the day on weekends. I take it at night because if I climb during the day, you want to separate exercise from mTOR inactivation by like 8 hours. Instead, I'll load up with leucine and some of the amino acids, right? Um, I also tend to take more anti-inflammatories on the weekends because I beat myself to a pulp. And if I don't, I'm incredibly sore by Monday.
Yes.
Um, right. And absolutely, I take the brain stuff, during the week. I try to lay off. I'm a big believer in microdosing and rotating things. Every study that combines different agents that do sort of similar things have demonstrated that they're synergistic and they work better together in smaller amounts than in major amounts, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is what I do. For example, I used to take 850 twice a day of metformin, and then I found a study that said 500 of metformin with 500 of berberine is better than either one together at 1,000 milligrams, right? I'm like, fantastic. So I reduce the dose, you reduce the side effects, and you get synergistic effects. It's fantastic. And so I think it works for other things as well. So for example, I take my resveratrol, my pterostilbene, and I take my camphora to activate my sirtuin-1, but I take way less than the recommended dose because I think that they're all synergistic.
Do you take creatine?
You know, it's funny. I started taking it last weekend to see. So I got interested in energy metabolism, right?
Mm.
People that do a lot of like weightlifting and very intensive short acting activities swear by it.
Mm.
You know, if you're an Olympic athlete, it's going to be significant. You know, if you're not, does it really matter? And the answer is I don't know. So I'm doing a little body experiment right now on weekends to see if it actually helps my climbing skills. And I have an N of 1, so I have really nothing to report back yet.
Right. Okay.
I don't know.
Interesting. Yeah. So you have said you're a junk food junkie, but do you count the nutrients from the food you eat when you're thinking about the dosages of your supplements?
Not really. Not
Not really.
really. And the reason I don't is that one of the reasons I started all of this is because I don't want to change the way that I've been since I was 20 or 30, right? When you were 20 years old, you went and you had a burger or you had pizza with your friends or you had a beer and you didn't think about it, right?
Mhm.
And if someone brought donuts to work, you had one and you didn't think about it, right? And
Mhm.
there's a sense of like freedom in that. And I don't want to lose that. So I don't go out of my way to be a junk food junkie, but if there's cookies sitting in the cafeteria, I'm going to eat one. And I don't want to feel guilt. I don't want to I just I don't want to think about it. I don't care. So I maximize everything that I do in terms of supplements, knowing that I'm going to try to outthink what I just do to myself on a regular basis. And again, I do not encourage anyone to follow this tact because it's a bit challenging and you know people out there are going to be arguing like this is the worst thing I've ever heard, right? But this is what I've chosen to do. I exercise on a daily basis and I don't watch what I eat and I'm in the best shape of my life and I'm middle-aged. So whatever I'm doing, I'm either damn lucky or it seems to be working.
Good. Yes. No, it does. I mean, if you still go rock climbing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember I saw you interview with Brent Nally. It was a while ago, but one thing I definitely noticed is you had some serious arms. I saw that.
I do. I'm very muscular. I do.
Yeah, I was impressed.
Thank you.
So thinking about as we get towards the end, future of aging. Well, actually, no. It's some other kind of things, therapies that you may have looked at. So, have you ever looked at stem cell therapy? Have you thought about that? How efficacious that might be?
So stem cells are really interesting, and I think they're very useful, but I think they're not as magical as some people might think. So, for example, if number one, you can get your own stem cells, right? You can harvest your own, have them grown in culture, and have them re-injected into you. The efficacy of that will depend on how old you are when you do it, right?
Mm.
So, what most people do, especially if they have money, is they leave the country. You can go to Costa Rica or the islands or Panama, and get a stem cell infusion from like placental type stuff. And they're very efficacious. However, they don't last as long as people think because most of the cells within a few days get eaten up by the spleen. And the ones that are left are not as functional as you think that they're going to be. And it turns out that 80% of the efficacy of a stem cell is actually from the vesicles that it exudes.
Mhm.
Right. So rather than going and getting a $30,000 stem cell infusion, it is much more cost effective to get an exosome infusion. Right.
Right.
So okay, so you're missing 20% of the benefit, but you're also missing a huge percentage of the cost, and you can do it all the time. So I'm a huge proponent of exosomes over stem cells, or if you want to do both, that's probably not unreasonable as well.
Right.
So at the moment, since most people can't get stem cells, I'm totally convinced that exosomes are the way to go.
Right. And you can get exosomes with.
You absolutely can. You absolutely can. Clearly, I mentioned this. They're in my freezer. You go
Yes.
to any longevity specialist, and you know they'll tell you that the FDA says you can't inject them systemically, but again, we all do. You can
Right.
inject them into your face. You can inject them into your limbs that don't work quite as well. You can inject them systemically. They come in various aliquots in the billions, and they're just incredibly efficacious. So I'm a
Hmm.
huge proponent of that.
Right.
And there's other things that are fun. I think that red light infrared therapy is extremely useful. It actually increases your mitochondrial efficiency. It actually makes the ATPase of your electron transport chain spin faster. So it does. It's really kind of cool. So you get more energy in your mitochondria in the tissues than when they're exposed to red light and infrared light therapy. So I think that that's a huge sort of beneficial thing to do. Exercise is clearly hugely useful in the longevity therapies. So that's big. Other people are doing sort of crazy things. I think that plasmapheresis is a little nuts. People swear by it, but to be honest, it's sort of like it's revved up dialysis is what it is, right? And to have it from a medical perspective, if you need dialysis to work to save your kidneys, you have to do it 3 times a week. So how many times can you actually do plasmapheresis to get rid of things that are harmful in terms of aging? You'd have to do it like once a week at least. And I just can't see that being all that good for you. So I think that that's kind of a crazy idea. But, people are coming up with therapies all the time, and there are going to be some people that are just swear by them. I'm more of a believer in risk benefit ratios. If it can help you, great. But if the cost is too high, then don't do it. So I think that we're not to where we need to be in terms of therapies, but we're getting there.
Right. So one other one, so NAD infusions, so NAD directly into intravenous. Do you any thoughts on that?
I think it's ridiculous.
Okay.
So, no, I do. So I'm an anesthesiologist, and we study the dynamics of drugs, how they get into your body, where the thresholds are, whatever, right? All the IV does, it gets it into your body faster. Right. And it does. It absolutely does. Right. So your blood volume then shoots up and then comes back down. Right. It's parabolic curve. And versus an oral supplement that sort of goes up more slowly and then levels off. So what's better? Does it really matter? In the end, you're going to end up at the same point. The IVs they're expensive. They're charging $1,500, $2,000 for an IV infusion, which is absurd when if you take pills, you can do the same thing within 10 days. Right. So it's kind of fancy to go get an infusion, but I don't think there's any evidence at all that it's going to help you in the long run. I mean, maybe if you're, 100 years old and you're unbelievably deficient, it might help you. But having worked in a hospital for 1 billion years, I can tell you that no one's ever showed up dying of an NAD deficiency. Right. You can get there with orals and it's not a big deal.
Okay. So thank you so much for joining us today. That was it was great going through that again. So here's the book. It is it's on Amazon and everywhere else, I guess. Are you going to make it Kindle? Because I wanted to get the Kindle version, but it's not there yet.
So funny you should ask that. I'm a very limited system here. So it is me, myself, and I, with the exception of my graphic designer, who helped me with the book. And he also was supposed to help me with the Kindle version. And his family has come upon a bit of a disaster because his son has a genetic disorder. And so I kind of had to push him to help me get like the paper version of this. So when they sort of get past their family issues, I'm going to push him to help me with the Kindle version. So the answer is we're working on it, just haven't gotten there yet.
Are you working on another book on sirtuins?
I am. Yeah. I was going to originally go down, book 3 was going to be about exercise physiology. A good friend of mine is an ex-Olympic athlete, and we've sort of trying to do that. But then I keep getting sidetracked. I became obsessed with glycation, and now I'm obsessed with sirtuins. So I'm not exactly sure what book 3 is going to be, because every time I get incredibly enticed into a certain thing, and then I'm like, this is going to be it. This is going to be the next book. And then someone tells me that no one's going to read that. That's incredibly boring. So the answer is, I don't know what book 3 is going to be yet, but it'll definitely be something.
Right. But I mean, certainly your first 2 books have done well, right? And they are very detailed and scientific.
I think that it's probably going to be like the next set of things that are incredibly important, only because I just tend to get obsessed with it. I think that I'm just going to get stuck in minutia at this point. It's going to be like, okay, these are the 3, like I said, these are the 3 things that activate SIR2 and 3. These are the 4 things that activate SIR2 and 6. This is how you fix your mitochondrial transition pore. And people may be like, okay, this is too much. But I love the minutia. I just think it's so cool. It's so intrinsic to understanding how we age. And it's just And I think there's a whole ton of people out there that kind of love it too. So that's probably where this is going.
Right. Yes, I think so too. And I think, the thing with biology is it's important to understand the detail, because you think, if you do this, then it seems logical, right? You restrict mTOR, then your muscle won't grow as much. But actually, if you restrict mTOR part of the time, then it encourages autophagy, which cleans things up, which then means the muscle builds better when you go and exercise. It's just that you've got to get these waves, and it's not always obvious the way things work without getting into the detail.
I absolutely agree. Yep. And the details are fun. They're boring, yes, but they're really fun.
I think they're fun. Yeah. I always like that.
Well,
okay. So thank you so much.
My absolute pleasure. Take care. Bye-bye.
You too. Yeah. Bye.